8-year-old triplets didn't know they had a father until they met him at their mother's grave. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The cold wind swept through Oakwood Cemetery in Rhode Island, rustling the golden brown leaves that had begun to gather around the freshly dug grave. The sky was a dull gray, a fitting backdrop to the grief weighing down on the mourners. Among them stood Ethan Caldwell, a man known for his immense wealth, his business empire, and the power that came with being one of Wall Street's most formidable investors. Yet today, none of that mattered. Today, he was just a man who had lost his wife. Clara had been his anchor. She was the only one who had ever seen the man behind the millions, behind the ruthless decisions, behind the suit and tie. They had built a life together, one filled with love, laughter, and regret. The regret of never having children had always haunted them, but they had learned to live with it. And now, as he stood by her grave, watching the coffin being lowered into the earth, a hollow filled his chest. It was as if part of him had been buried along with her. The funeral was grand, as expected. Rhode Island's elite had gathered, some out of genuine sorrow, others because it was the social event of the season. Colleagues, business partners, and friends approached Ethan to offer condolences, each handshake and hug feeling mechanical. He barely registered any of it. His world had shrunk to silence, drowned by the echoes of Clara's laughter, the warmth of her voice that would never reach his ears again. He wanted the crowd to vanish, to leave him alone with his grief, but he knew that was impossible. A man like him was never truly alone, except in the ways that mattered most. As the service ended and people began to drift away, Ethan remained rooted by the grave, staring at the polished wood of the coffin, now dusted with soil. His fingers trembled as he pulled his coat tighter against the biting wind. Martin, his driver, an older man who'd been with the Caldwell family for decades, waited patiently at a distance, respecting his employer's need for solitude. Ethan took a deep breath, ready to turn and leave, when his eyes caught something unusual. 3 small figures stood near the edge of the cemetery, half hidden behind a towering oak tree. 3 identical little girls with dark chestnut hair tied back in neat ponytails, dressed in simple gray coats that stood out against the sea of expensive black attire worn by the other attendees. Their faces were pale, their expressions unreadable, but their eyes, sharp and searching, watched him with an intensity that felt beyond their years. They couldn't have been more than 8 years old, yet there was something deliberate in their synchronized stillness, as if they were waiting for something or someone. Ethan frowned, trying to place them. He didn't recognize them from family gatherings, nor did they seem to belong to any of the business associates who'd come to pay their respects. Yet there was an inexplicable pull, a flicker of something in his chest he couldn't name. One of the girls, he couldn't tell which, they were so alike, took a hesitant step forward, then froze, as if reconsidering. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment, and Ethan felt a jolt, a strange urgency to approach them. But before he could act, all 3 turned in perfect unison and slipped behind the oak tree, disappearing from sight. "Sir," Martin's voice broke through his reverie. "The car is ready." Ethan glanced toward where the girls had vanished, then shook his head. "Right," he muttered, dismissing the encounter as a trick of his grieving mind. They were probably just curious kids, relatives of the cemetery staff, perhaps, or locals drawn by the large gathering. He followed Martin to the car, sinking into the leather seat as the engine hummed to life. But as they drove away, the image of those 3 identical faces lingered, refusing to fade. That night, Ethan sat alone in his Manhattan penthouse, the city skyline sprawling before him through floor-to-ceiling windows. The view had once been a source of pride, a testament to his success, but now it felt cold and empty. He poured a glass of bourbon, the amber liquid catching the dim light of his study, and tried to focus on the silence. Clara's absence was a void he couldn't fill, not with wealth, not with work, not with anything he'd built over the years. He picked up a framed photo from his desk, Clara smiling on their last trip to Paris, her eyes bright with life, and whispered, "I miss you." His voice cracked, the sound swallowed by the vast, sterile space. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw them again. Those three girls by the oak tree, their pale faces and synchronized movements etched into his mind. He told himself it was nothing, just exhaustion and grief playing tricks. But Clara had always believed in signs, in moments that meant more than they seemed. If she were here, she'd tell him to trust his gut, to dig deeper. He sighed, taking another sip of bourbon, and tried to push the thought away. Yet, deep down, he knew this wasn't the end of it. By morning, the restlessness had turned into resolve. Ethan wasn't a man who left questions unanswered. Not in business, and now, it seemed, not in this. He found himself in his office on the 54th floor of Caldwell Investments, staring blankly at a stack of quarterly reports. His assistant had scheduled a day full of meetings, but his mind was elsewhere, fixated on those three mystery girls. Frustrated, he picked up his phone and dialed Martin. "I need you to do something for me," Ethan said as soon as Martin answered. "Those three little girls at the cemetery yesterday, the ones by the oak tree. Do you remember them?" A brief pause. "Yes, sir. Three identical girls. They were watching the service from a distance." "Exactly. I need to know who they are. Check with the cemetery staff. See if anyone saw them. Find out whatever you can." Martin didn't question the odd request. One of the reasons Ethan trusted him implicitly. "I'll get on it, sir," he said, and the call ended. Ethan leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. He felt foolish, chasing a hunch born from a fleeting moment. But he'd built his empire on instincts like this, knowing when something demanded attention. The girls didn't fit into the polished world of the funeral. They were an anomaly, and anomalies gnawed at him until he understood them. Later that evening, as Ethan sat in his penthouse with another drink in hand, his phone rang. It was Martin. "Sir, I found them." Ethan sat up, his heartbeat quickening. "Who are they?" "Their names are Ava, Sophie, and Lily Bennett. 8 years old, living in Brooklyn with their aunt, Rebecca Bennett." Martin hesitated, his tone shifting. "There's more. Their mother was Laura Bennett. She passed away 3 months ago, leukemia." The glass nearly slipped from Ethan's hand. Laura Bennett, a name he hadn't heard in nearly a decade, yet one that still carried weight. They'd met at a university fundraiser. She a brilliant young literature professor, he an ambitious finance student on the cusp of his career. Their relationship had been brief, but intense, a collision of passion and intellect that ended when he moved to London for a job that promised to launch him into stratosphere. He'd chosen ambition over her, and she'd let him go without a fight, or so he'd thought. "Sir," Martin's voice pulled him back. "You still there?" "Yeah." Ethan managed his throat tight. "The girls, you said they're 8? Born May 12th, 9 years ago," Martin confirmed. 9 years. The timing lined up perfectly with their relationship. A heavy realization settled over him, pressing against his ribs. "Thank you, Martin," he said, ending the call. He walked to the window, staring out at the city lights, his mind racing. 3 identical girls, 8 years old. Laura's daughters. His daughters? The possibility hit him like a wave, but it wasn't joy or relief that followed. It was uncertainty. Why hadn't Laura told him? Had she hated him that much, or had she wanted to shield the girl from his world? He hadn't been ready for a family back then. Hell, he'd barely been ready for a relationship. But to think she'd carried this secret alone, raised 3 children while he built skyscrapers and amassed billions. It was a weight he didn't know how to bear. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He paced the penthouse, replaying every moment with Laura he could remember. Her sharp wit, her quiet strength, the way she'd looked at him when he told her he was leaving, like she'd known it was coming but still hoped he'd stay. He'd been so young, so focused on his own path, that he hadn't seen the cost of his choices. Now, standing in the wreckage of his grief for Clara and this sudden, staggering possibility, he felt unmoored. By dawn, he made a decision, not to storm into their lives with a DNA test or a claim, but to understand them first. He wasn't sure what he'd find, or if he even had the right to intrude. But those 3 girls by the oak tree had shifted something in him, and he couldn't turn back now. Ethan Caldwell wasn't a man accustomed to hesitation. His life had been a series of calculated risks, buying failing companies, outmaneuvering competitors, betting millions on instincts that paid off. But this was different. This wasn't a boardroom he could dominate or a deal he could close with a signature. This was about three little girls who might carry his blood, and the stakes felt impossibly high. After Martin's call, Ethan spent the next day in a haze, his office chair swiveling absently as he stared out at the Manhattan skyline. He didn't want to barge into their lives with demands or declarations. He'd seen too many men wield power like a battering ram, leaving wreckage behind. If Ava, Sophie, and Lily were his daughters, he needed to earn their trust, not claim it. By afternoon, he'd summoned Martin to the penthouse. The older man arrived with his usual quiet efficiency, a thermos of coffee in hand. He knew Ethan hadn't slept. "I need a way to get close to them," Ethan said, pacing the hardwood floor. "Not as their father, not yet. Just close enough to understand who they are." Martin raised an eyebrow, setting the thermos on the glass coffee table. "You're not thinking of showing up at their doorstep with a checkbook, are you, sir?" Ethan stopped, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "No, that's the last thing they need from me." He ran a hand through his hair, the salt and pepper strands catching the light. "Laura kept them from me for a reason. I need to figure out why before I decide what to do." Martin nodded, thoughtful. "They're in Brooklyn, Park Slope. From what I gathered, their aunt, Rebecca Bennett, works long hours as a social worker. The girls spend afternoons at a community center nearby, PS 107's after-school program. Reading clubs, art classes, that sort of thing." A community center, Ethan mused. It was a world away from his polished existence. Board meetings and penthouse dinners replaced by folding chairs and finger paint. "Can you get me in there?" Martin's lips twitched, a rare hint of amusement. "You mean volunteer? I reckon I can make a call or two. But, sir, you'll stick out like a sore thumb in a suit and tie." "Then I won't wear one," Ethan said firmly. "Find me a spot, something low-key. I don't want anyone asking questions." 2 days later, Ethan stood outside the Park Slope Community Center, a squat brick building wedged between a bodega and a laundromat. He'd traded his tailored suit for jeans and a navy sweater, but he still felt out of place, his polished leather shoes scuffing against the cracked sidewalk. Martin had worked his magic, securing him a role as a mentor for the center's reading club. No background checks beyond a cursory phone call, thanks to a friend of friend. Ethan carried a stack of used paperbacks he'd picked up from a secondhand shop, figuring it was a plausible excuse for being there. Inside, the center buzzed with controlled chaos. Kids shouting, volunteers corralling them into groups, the faint smell of glue and crayons in the air. Ethan scanned the room, his pulse quickening as he spotted them. Ava, Sophie, and Lily huddled at a table near the back. Ava sat with her arms crossed, her posture rigid like a guard on duty. Sophie was bent over a book, her brow furrowed in concentration. Lily doodled on a scrap of paper, her movements soft and distracted. They were identical, same chestnut hair, same sharp cheekbones, but their differences shone through in every gesture. "New guy." A voice interrupted his thoughts. A woman in her 30s with a clipboard and a no-nonsense braid approached him. Marissa, the program coordinator, according to the name tag pinned to her fleece jacket. "Ethan Caldwell," he said, extending a hand. "I'm here for the reading club." She shook it, sizing him up. "You don't look like our usual volunteers. What's your story?" He'd rehearsed this. "Just moved back to the city. Thought I'd give something back." It wasn't a lie, not entirely. Marissa shrugged, handing him a roster. "Fair enough. You're with the third graders today. They're a handful, but nothing you can't handle if you've got patience. Those 3-inch, she nodded toward the triplets, they stick to themselves mostly. Good kids, but guarded since their mom passed." Ethan nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "Thanks for the heads up." He approached their table slowly, the paperbacks tucked under his arm. Up close, the girls were even more striking. Laura's features echoed in their faces, her intensity in their eyes. He cleared his throat. "Mind if I sit here?" Ava looked up first, her gaze narrowing. "Who are you?" "Ethan. I'm helping with the reading club." He set the books on the table, a mix of Charlotte's Web, The Phantom Tollbooth, and a worn copy of Matilda. "Brought some extras if you're looking for something new." Sophie glanced at the stack, pushing her glasses up her nose. We've already read those, she said matter-of-factly. Except maybe Toll Booth. What's it about? It's about a boy who finds a magic toll booth that takes him to a world of numbers and words, Ethan said, easing into a chair. Lots of puzzles. Might be up your alley. Sophie tilted her head, considering, while Ava kept her arms crossed, studying him like he was a puzzle she didn't trust. Lily peeked up from her drawing, a sketch of a bird with intricate feathers, and offered a shy smile. I like stories with magic, she said softly. Then you'll like this one, Ethan replied, sliding the book toward her. You can borrow it if you want. Ava cut in before Lily could respond. We don't need your books. We've got plenty at home. Ethan nodded, unfazed. Fair enough. Just thought I'd offer. He leaned back, giving them space, and picked up Matilda to flip through it, letting the moment settle. He wasn't here to push. He'd learned long ago that forcing your way in rarely worked, whether in business or otherwise. The session passed quietly. The girls didn't warm to him, but they didn't outright reject him either. Sophie borrowed the phantom toll booth after a whispered debate with her sisters, and Lily kept sneaking glances at him over her sketch pad. Ava remained the gatekeeper, her sharp eyes tracking his every move. When the hour ended and the kids scattered, Ethan lingered, watching them head toward the exit where a woman waited, Rebecca Bennett, their aunt. She was taller than Laura had been, with the same dark hair but a harder edge to her posture, like someone who'd carried too much for too long. She caught his eye, frowned, then ushered the girls out without a word. Back at the penthouse that night, Ethan stood by the window, bourbon in hand, replaying the encounter. They were Laura's daughters. That much was clear in their faces, their mannerisms. But were they his? The question gnawed at him, and with it came another. Why had Laura kept them a secret? He'd walked away from her, yes, but she could have reached out. He would have what? Dropped everything? He wasn't sure, and that uncertainty was a splinter under his skin. The next day, he called Martin. I need more on Laura, discreetly. Anything you can find about her life after I left for London. Martin didn't ask why. I'll see what I can dig up, sir. But you're stepping into murky waters here. I know, Ethan said. That's why I'm not rushing it. Over the next week, Ethan returned to the community center 3 more times. He kept his distance, helping other kids with their reading while observing the triplets. Ava challenged him once, asking why he kept showing up. Don't you have a job or something? And he answered honestly, I do. But this matters too. Sophie started asking him questions about books, testing his knowledge, while Lily showed him a drawing of a tree one day, her voice barely audible as she said, It's like the one at the cemetery. The comment jolted him, but he just nodded, filing it away. Then came the confrontation. On his 4th visit, Rebecca approached him as the session ended. The girls were at a craft table, gluing paper leaves onto a poster, out of earshot. She crossed her arms, her voice low and steely. Ethan Caldwell, right? I looked you up. Wall Street hotshot. What's a guy like you doing in a place like this? He met her gaze, keeping his tone even. Volunteering. Like I told Marissa. Bullshit, she said, not blinking. You're here for them, aren't you? Ava, Sophie, and Lily. What? Ethan weighed his options. Lie, and she'd see through it. She was too sharp. Push too hard, and she'd shut him out. I knew their mother, he said finally. Laura and I were close a long time ago. I didn't know about the girls until recently. Rebecca's expression hardened. She never mentioned you. Not once. So why should I believe you're here for anything but your own ego? You don't have to, Ethan said. I'm not asking for anything. I just want to be around them, see what kind of people they are. No strings. She studied him, her jaw tight. They've been through hell losing Laura. I won't let some rich stranger waltz in and mess with their heads. You want to be here? Prove you're not just another guy who'll disappear when it gets tough. Fair, Ethan said, holding her stare. I'll prove it. Rebecca didn't soften, but she stepped back, giving him a curt nod. We'll see. She turned to call the girls, leaving Ethan standing there, her words echoing in his mind. Prove it. He wasn't sure he could, not yet, but he'd damn well try. That night, Martin called with a lead. Found an old neighbor of Laura's in Brooklyn. She's still around. Runs a flower shop now. Might know something about those years after you left. Ethan gripped the phone, his pulse quickening. Set it up. I need to know what Laura never told me. The flower shop sat on a quiet corner of 7th Avenue and Park Slope, its faded green awning fluttering in the brisk November wind. A hand-painted sign read Bennett's Blooms, though the paint had chipped over the years, giving it a weathered charm. Ethan stepped out of the town car, waving Martin off. He didn't want the sleek black vehicle lingering in this modest neighborhood, drawing eyes. He dressed down again, a gray wool coat over jeans, but he still felt like an outsider as he pushed open the door, a bell jingling above him. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of roses and damp earth. Shelves lined the walls, bursting with potted plants and bouquets in mismatched vases. Behind the counter stood a woman in her late 50s, her silver-streaked hair pulled into a loose bun. She wore a faded apron over a sweater, and her hands moved deftly as she trimmed a bundle of chrysanthemums. She glanced up at Ethan, her eyes narrowing slightly, assessing, not unfriendly. "You're not here for flowers," she said, her voice gravelly but warm. "Too early for a guy like you to be buying roses." Ethan managed a small smile. "You're right. I'm Ethan Caldwell. Martin said he spoke to you about Laura Bennett." The woman set her shears down, wiping her hands on her apron. "Ellen Russo. Yeah, he called. Said you're digging into Laura's past." "What?" "I knew her years ago," Ethan said, keeping his tone steady. "We were close, but I left for London, and we lost touch. I just found out she had daughters. I'm trying to understand what her life was like after me." Ellen studied him for a long moment, then gestured to a stool by the counter. "Sit. I've got coffee in the back, black, no fancy stuff. You look like you could use it." He nodded, settling onto the stool as she disappeared through a curtained doorway. She returned with 2 chipped mugs, handing him one before leaning against the counter. "Laura lived 2 blocks from here," she began, sipping her coffee. "Rented a little walk-up when the girls were born. I met her at the co-op. She was buying diapers and juggling 3 crying babies. Looked like she hadn't slept in a month, but she smiled anyway. That was Laura." Ethan's chest tightened at the image. Laura alone with triplets, no support, while he'd been in London, chasing deals and building his name. "She never mentioned a father?" Ellen shook her head. "Not by name. Said he was long gone." Her words didn't sound bitter, though, more like she'd made peace with it. "She worked her ass off, taught night classes at the community college, wrote papers on Jane Austen when the girls were napping. Never asked for help, even when the bills piled up." "Did she ever?" Ethan hesitated, the question heavy on his tongue. "Did she ever think about reaching out to him?" Ellen's gaze softened, like she saw the guilt behind his words. "Once. The girls were about 3. Tough years, all those tantrums and fevers at once. She told me she looked him up, found out he'd made it big somewhere overseas. Said she wrote a letter, but tore it up. He's got his life, she told me. I've got mine." Ethan stared into his coffee, the steam curling upward. A letter she never sent. It wasn't spite, then. It was Laura's choice, her way of protecting her world, and maybe his too. "What was she like with the girls?" he asked quietly. "Fierce," Ellen said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Loved them like they were her whole universe. Ava was her little shadow, stubborn as hell, always testing her. Sophie had her brain, always asking why the sky's blue or how plants grow. Lily was her heart, quiet, drawing pictures before she could talk right. Laura used to say they kept her going, even when she got sick." Ethan's throat tightened. "She didn't tell anyone about the leukemia?" "Not till the end," Ellen said, her voice dropping. "Kept teaching, kept parenting like nothing was wrong. When she couldn't hide it anymore, Rebecca moved in to help. Broke Laura's heart to leave those girls. Kept saying she hadn't taught them enough yet." The bell jingled as a customer entered, and Ellen straightened. "That's all I've got. Laura was private. Didn't spill her secrets, even to me. If you're looking for answers, you won't find them in old stories. You'll have to ask the girls or Rebecca." Ethan stood, setting the mug down. "Thanks, Ellen. This means more than you know." She waved him off. "Just don't break anything that's already been patched up. Those kids have had enough of that." Outside, Ethan lingered on the sidewalk, the cold air biting his face. Laura hadn't hated him. She let him go, build a life without him, and poured everything into Ava, Sophie, and Lily. It wasn't absolution, but it was something, a glimpse into the woman she'd become after he'd walked away. That afternoon, he returned to the Park Slope Community Center, the conversation with Ellen still echoing in his mind. The reading club was in full swing, and he spotted the triplets at their usual table. Ava was arguing with Sophie over a book, her voice sharp. "It's boring if there's no adventure," while Lily sketched in silence, her pencil scratching softly against the paper. Ethan approached, setting a new stack of books down. "Found something with adventure," he said, sliding The Hobbit toward Ava. "Dragons' battles. Might keep you interested." Ava eyed the book, then him. "You keep bringing stuff." "What?" "Maybe I like reading too," he said, sitting across from her. "Or maybe I think you three deserve good stories." Sophie adjusted her glasses, peering at the cover. "It's got maps." "I like maps." Lily looked up, her voice tentative. "Does it have magic like Tollbooth?" "Plenty," Ethan said, meeting her shy smile. "You'll have to tell me what you think." Ava took the book, flipping through it, but her guard didn't drop. "You're weird," she muttered. "Most grown-ups don't care what we read." Ethan shrugged. "I'm not most grown-ups." The session passed with small victories. Sophie asked him about Middle-earth geography. Lily showed him a sketch of a dragon, and Ava didn't outright reject the book. But as the hour ended, Rebecca appeared, her expression tighter than usual. She waited until the girls were packing up, then pulled Ethan aside. "Asked around about you," she said, her voice low. "People say you're some big shot who buys companies for fun. What's your game here, Caldwell?" "No game," Ethan said, keeping his hands in his pockets to seem less threatening. "I told you, I knew Laura. I'm not here to buy anyone's trust." "Then why's Ava asking me why some rich guy keeps hanging around?" Rebecca snapped. "They're starting to notice you, and I don't like it. They've got enough questions without you stirring things up." Ethan took a breath, choosing his words carefully. "I'm not trying to stir anything. I see Laura in them. I want to know who they are. Maybe help if they'll let me." Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "Help how? With your money?" "We don't need it." "Not money," he said quickly. "Time. Consistency. Whatever they need that I can give." She crossed her arms, unconvinced. "You think showing up with books makes you a hero? These girls lost their mom. They don't need a stranger playing savior." "I'm not here to save anyone," Ethan said, his voice firm but quiet. "I'm here because I walked away from Laura once, and I don't want to walk away from them too. Not if there's a chance I belong in their lives." Rebecca froze, her gaze sharpening. "What's that supposed to mean?" He hadn't meant to go that far. Not yet, but the words were out. "I don't know for sure," he admitted. "But the timing, they could be mine. I'm not asking you to confirm it. I just want a chance to figure it out. With them, not against you." For a moment, she said nothing, her jaw tight. Then she stepped closer, her voice a hiss. "If you hurt them, if you so much as make them cry, I'll make sure you regret it. You're on thin ice, Caldwell." "I get it," he said, meeting her stare. "I'm not going anywhere unless they tell me to." She held his gaze a beat longer, then turned to call the girls. "Ava, Sophie, Lily, let's go." They grabbed their backpacks, casting curious glances at Ethan as they followed her out. Lily waved shyly, and he nodded back, a flicker of warmth cutting through the tension. That night, Ethan sat in his penthouse, the city lights blurred beyond the glass. He pulled out a photo Ellen had slipped him, a faded snapshot of Laura holding 3 toddlers in a park, her smile tired but radiant. He traced her face with his thumb, the weight of her absence mingling with the possibility of her legacy. Rebecca's warning rang in his ears, but so did Lily's wave, Sophie's questions, Ava's reluctant curiosity. Thin ice or not, he was in this now. For Laura, for them, for the man he might still become. Winter tightened its grip on New York, dusting the streets of Park Slope with a thin layer of snow that crunched under Ethan's boots as he walked toward the community center. It had been 2 weeks since his tense exchange with Rebecca, and though she hadn't barred him from volunteering, her warning hung over him like a storm cloud. He'd kept his distance where he could, focusing on small, steady steps with the girls, bringing books, answering Sophie's endless questions, nodding at Lily's sketches. Ava still watched him like a hawk, but even she'd softened slightly, occasionally joining their conversations with a grudging remark or two. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was something. Today, though, felt different. The center was quieter than usual, the usual chaos muted by a snow day that had canceled school for most kids. Only a handful showed up, including Ava, Sophie, and Lily, who sat at their table with a pile of construction paper and glue sticks, working on a project Ethan couldn't quite make out from the door. He hung his coat on a rack, brushing snow from his shoulders, and approached with a cautious smile. "Looks like a small crew today," he said, setting a thermos of hot chocolate on the table. Martin's idea, a peace offering that didn't scream wealth. Sophie glanced up, her glasses fogged from the warmth inside. "School's out, but Aunt Rebecca had a meeting. She said we could stay here instead of home alone." "Smart move," Ethan said, unscrewing the thermos cap. "Hot chocolate, anyone?" Lily's eyes brightened, and she nodded eagerly. "Yes, please." Sophie hesitated, then shrugged, sliding a paper cup toward him. Ava crossed her arms, her expression skeptical. "You always bring stuff?" she said, her tone edged with suspicion. "What's in it for you?" Ethan poured the steaming liquid into Lily's cup, then Sophie's, keeping his movements deliberate. "Maybe I just like hot chocolate," he said lightly. "Or maybe I figured it's a snow day tradition worth keeping." Ava didn't reply, but she didn't stop him when he poured a third cup and slid it toward her. She took it after a beat, sipping silently, her eyes still on him. He settled into a chair, giving them space to lead. The project he saw now was a makeshift model, cardboard and paper shaped in what looked like a tree with branches stretching outward. "What's this?" he asked, nodding at the mess of glue and scraps. "It's for school," Sophie explained, wiping her hands on a napkin. "A family tree. We're supposed to show our ancestors, but we don't know much past Mom and Aunt Rebecca." Ethan's pulse quickened, but he kept his face neutral. "That's a tough one. What V you got so far?" Lily pointed to a branch near the top, labeled in her careful handwriting, Laura Bennett. Below it, 3 smaller branches read Ava, Sophie, and Lily. A line stretched sideways to Rebecca Bennett, and above Laura, a single name, Margaret Bennett, their grandmother, he assumed. The rest was blank, a stark emptiness that mirrored the gaps in their story. "Mom didn't talk about her parents much," Ava said, her voice quieter than usual. "Said they died when she was little. We don't know anything else." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. A family tree with no father listed. Not surprising, given what Ellen had told him, but stung all the same. "That's a good start," he said carefully. "Sometimes it's hard to fill in the blanks when people aren't around to tell you." Sophie adjusted her glasses, her analytical gaze fixed on the model. "There's supposed to be a dad somewhere, right? Everyone has one. But Mom never said who he was." The question hung in the air, sharp and unguarded. Ethan felt Lily's eyes on him, soft and searching, while Ava's narrowed slightly, as if testing him. He took a slow breath, choosing his words like stepping onto thin ice. "Yeah, everyone's out of dad," he said. "Maybe she didn't talk about him because it was complicated or because she wanted to keep you 3 all to herself." "That's dumb," Ava muttered, but there was no bite in it, just a flicker of frustration. "She could have told us something." Lily traced the blank space above Laura Bennett with her finger. "I drew him once," she said softly. "In my head, I mean. Mom said he was tall, but that's all I got." Ethan's heart thudded. "Tall, huh? That's a start. What did he look like in your drawing?" She shrugged, her cheeks pink. "Just a shadow. I didn't know what else to put." He smiled, masking the ache in his chest. "Shadows are good placeholders. You can fill them in later if you want." The moment passed as Sophie launched into a lecture about how family trees should include DNA percentages. It's science, not just names. And Ethan let her ramble, grateful for the distraction. They spent the next hour cutting paper leaves and gluing them on, the girls debating where imaginary relatives might fit. Ethan stayed on the edges, offering scissors or a steady hand when asked, but his mind churned. They were reaching for a past he might hold the key to, and he wasn't sure how long he could keep it locked away. The door banged open, cutting through their quiet bubble. Rebecca stormed in, her coat dusted with snow, her expression a mix of exhaustion and irritation. Girls, get your stuff. We're leaving. Ava frowned. We're not done. Now, Rebecca snapped, her tone sharper than Ethan had heard before. She glanced at him, her eyes cold. Caldwell outside. We need to talk. He followed her into the snowy courtyard, the wind biting at his face as she rounded on him. What the hell are you doing? She demanded, her voice low but fierce. I come in and see you cozying up with them over some school project. It's a family tree, Ethan said, keeping his calm. They asked me to help. Help with what? She shot back. Filling in lies? You think I didn't hear Sophie asking about their dad? You're planting ideas, and I told you, I won't let you mess with their heads. I didn't plant anything, he said, his voice firming. They're smart. They're asking questions on their own. I'm just here, Rebecca. I'm not pushing. She stepped closer, her breath visible in the cold air. You're here too much. Ava came home yesterday, saying you're not like other grown-ups. Lily keeps drawing you in her sketchbook. They're getting attached, and you still haven't told me what you're really after. Ethan met her gaze, the weight of her words sinking in. I told you, I think it might be mine. I'm not here to hurt them. I'm here because I can't walk away again. Rebecca's face tightened, a flash of something, anger, fear, crossing her eyes. You don't get it, do you? Laura didn't want you in their lives. She could have tracked you down. Hell, she knew where you were when you hit the Forbes list. She chose not to, and now you think you can just slide in because you feel guilty? Her words cut deeper than he'd expected, slicing through the fragile hope he'd been building. Maybe she chose wrong, he said quietly. Not for me, for them. They deserve to know who they are, even if it's messy. You don't get to decide that, Rebecca hissed. I've been there, every fever, every nightmare, every time they cried for her. Where were you? Chasing billions while Laura was dying. Ethan flinched, the truth of it stinging. I didn't know, he said, his voice raw. If I had, I'd have been there. I'm here now. For how long? She challenged. Until it gets hard? Until they ask questions you can't answer. He didn't have a response, not one she'd accept. The silence stretched between them, heavy and cold, until she shook her head. Stay away from them, Ethan. I mean it this time. She turned back inside, calling the girls again. They emerged, bundled in coats, casting confused glances between Ethan and their aunt. Lily waved hesitantly, but Ava grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the street. Sophie lingered a moment, clutching the hobbit, then followed. Ethan watched them go, snow swirling around their small figures, a hollow ache settling in his chest. Back at the penthouse, he didn't pour a drink. He didn't want the blur. Instead, he sat at his desk, pulling out the photo Ellen had given him and the few scraps Martin had dug up, a copy of Laura's obit from a local paper, a faculty bio from her teaching days. He spread them out, piecing together the woman he'd lost and the life she'd built without him. Then he found it, a folded note tucked in the bio, scrawled in Laura's elegant script. Not a letter, just a fragment. If he ever comes back, tell him the girls are enough. They don't need him to be whole. Ethan stared at it, the words blurring as his eyes stung. Was she right? Were they enough without him? He'd spent his life filling voids with wealth and power, but this wasn't a gap he could buy his way into. Rebecca's ultimatum echoed in his head, stay away. But the girls' faces, Ava's defiance, Sophie's curiosity, Lily's quiet trust, kept pulling him back. He picked up his phone and dialed Martin. I need you to find something, he said when the older man answered. Anything Laura left behind. Journals, sketches, anything that might tell me what she wanted for them. Martin's voice was cautious. Sir, you sure about this? Sounds like you're digging a hole deeper than you can climb out of. I'm already in it, Ethan said. I just need to know if there's a way up. The snow had thickened over Brooklyn by mid-December, blanketing Park Slope in a hush that felt both peaceful and isolating. Ethan sat in his penthouse, the city lights muted beyond the frost-rimmed windows, a small stack of papers and objects spread across his desk. Martin had come through. After days of digging, he'd tracked down a box of Laura's belongings from a storage unit Rebecca had nearly forgotten about. It wasn't much. A worn journal, a handful of sketches, a few photos curling at the edges. But to Ethan, it was a lifeline, a chance to hear Laura's voice one last time and understand what she'd wanted for the girls, and maybe for him. He started with the journal, its leather cover cracked from years of handling. The entries were sporadic, some dated from when the triplets were toddlers, others from her final months. Laura's handwriting was still elegant, though shakier in the later pages. He flipped through, his breath catching at glimpses of her life. Ava climbed the bookshelf again, caught her with my Austen anthology, grinning like she'd conquered Everest. Sophie asked why rain falls instead of floats. Spent an hour on the floor with encyclopedias. Lily drew me today, said I looked tired. Hate that she sees it. No mention of him by name, but one entry, dated 6 years ago, stopped him cold. Thought about him today. Saw his face on a magazine at the bodega. Billionaire now, just like he wanted. Wonder if he'd recognize the girls in a crowd. Probably not. They're mine, and that's enough. Ethan set the journal down, his hands trembling. She'd seen him, his success, his distance, and still chosen silence. Not out of anger, but out of a fierce, quiet resolve to keep her daughters whole without him. The sketches were next. Lily's talent clearly inherited, with Laura's pencil lines capturing the girls at play, at sleep, at moments of unguarded joy. One drawing stood out, a tall, shadowed figure standing apart from 3 small silhouettes. A question mark scrawled above it. No face, no name, just a possibility she'd left undefined. The photos were the hardest. Laura with the triplets as babies, her face gaunt but glowing. Laura laughing with Rebecca at a park. A faded shot of Laura and Ethan from college, his arm around her, both of them young and reckless. He stared at it, the memory flooding back, her teasing him about his ambition, him promising her the world without knowing what it would cost. He'd kept that promise, in a way, but not for her. Rebecca's ultimatum, stay away, echoed in his mind, warring with the pull of those 3 girls who'd carved a space in his life he hadn't known was empty. He couldn't stay away. Not now, not when he was this close to understanding. But he wouldn't force his way in either. If there was a path forward, it had to come from them. 2 days later, Ethan stood outside the Park Slope Community Center, snow crunching under his boots, a small package tucked under his arm. It was a Saturday, the center hosting a winter craft fair, tables of knit scarves and paper snowflakes, kids darting between them. He'd heard from Marissa, the coordinator, that the girls would be there, helping with a booth. Rebecca hadn't banned him outright, but he knew showing up was a risk. He'd take it. Inside, the air was warm and thick with the smell of cider and pine. He spotted them near the back, Ava arranging a stack of handmade bookmarks with military precision, Sophie explaining something about symmetry to a bored-looking kid, Lily painting tiny ornaments with delicate strokes. They hadn't seen him yet. He lingered by a table of cookies, buying a few to stall, until Lily glanced up and waved, her face lighting up. "Ethan," she called, drawing Sophie's attention. Ava turned too, her expression shifting from surprise to wariness. He approached slowly, holding up the cookies. "Thought you might need a break," he said, setting them on the table. "Busy day." Sophie took a cookie, analyzing it before biting. "We've sold 12 bookmarks and 6 ornaments. It's statistically decent." "Better than decent," Ethan said, smiling. "You're pros." Ava didn't touch the cookies, her arms crossed. "Aunt Rebecca said you weren't coming around anymore." Ethan's stomach tightened, but he kept his tone light. "She's right. I've been giving you space. But I heard about the fair, and I didn't want to miss it. If you want to go, I will." The girls exchanged glances, their silent communication at work. Lily spoke first, soft but firm. "You can stay. I like when you're here." Sophie nodded. "You're not annoying like some grown-ups." Ava didn't agree, but she didn't object either, just picked up a bookmark and handed it to him. $5, she said flatly. "If you're staying, you're buying." He laughed, pulling out his wallet. "Deal." They worked the booth together for the next hour, Ethan fetching supplies, charming a few parents into buying, keeping the peace when Sophie and Ava bickered over pricing. It was easy, natural, a rhythm he hadn't expected to find. But Rebecca's shadow loomed, and he knew it wouldn't last. She arrived as the fair wound down, her coat dusted with fresh snow, her eyes locking onto Ethan the moment she stepped inside. The girls were packing up, chattering about their sales, but the air shifted when Rebecca approached. "Girls, get your coats," she said, her voice clipped. "Caldwell outside." Again. He followed her into the snowy courtyard, bracing for the storm. She didn't waste time. "I told you to stay away." "What part of that didn't you get?" "I got it," Ethan said, his breath fogging in the cold. "But they didn't tell me to go." "I'm not forcing anything, Rebecca. I'm here because they let me be." "They're kids," she snapped. "They don't know what's good for them. You think you can waltz in after 8 years and play dad because you feel bad?" "I'm not playing," he said, his voice steady despite the heat rising in his chest. "I found something. Laura's journal, her sketches. She didn't hate me, Rebecca. She let me go because she thought it was best for me, for them. But she wondered about it too. I've got proof." Rebecca's face tightened, a flicker of doubt breaking through her anger. "Proof? What's some old scribbles? That doesn't change the fact that she raised them alone while you were off getting rich." "I know," Ethan said, the weight of it heavy in his voice. "I can't undo that. But I'm not here to take over. I'm here to add something if they want it. They're asking questions, Rebecca. You can't stop that forever." She looked away, her jaw clenched, snowflakes catching in her hair. "They found her journal too," she said finally, her voice low. "Last week. Sophie figured it out. Match your name to some article online. They've been asking me if you're him." Ethan's heart stopped. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing," she said, meeting his eyes again. "I didn't know what to say. They're not ready for this. Not after losing her." "They're stronger than you think," he said quietly. "They're Laura's kids." Rebecca didn't reply, her silence a battleground of doubt and resolve. She turned back inside, leaving him in the snow, his pulse racing. The girls knew, or suspected. It wasn't his move anymore. An hour later, as the fair ended, Ava approached him alone, her sisters trailing behind. She held a bookmark, simple, with a tree drawn in Lily's style, and thrust it at him. "We made this," she said, her voice firm but unsteady. "Sophie says your name was in Mom's book. Is it true?" Ethan knelt to her level, taking the bookmark, his throat tight. "Yeah," he said simply. "I think so. I loved your mom a long time ago. I didn't know about you until after she was gone." Ava's eyes searched his, fierce and vulnerable. "Why didn't you come sooner?" "I didn't know," he said, the truth raw. "I wish I had. I'm here now, if you'll have me." Sophie stepped forward, analytical as ever. "It's logical. You're tall like Lily Drew, and you act like you care. But we don't need a dad to fix us." "I'm not here to fix you," Ethan said, looking at all three. "You're already enough, just like your mom said. I just want to be part of it, whatever you let me be." Lily moved last, slipping her hand into his, her voice a whisper. "Can you come to our ballet thing next week?" "Mom always did." Ethan swallowed hard, nodding. "I'd like that." Ava didn't take his hand, but she didn't walk away either. "We'll see," she said, her standard line but softer now. They left with Rebecca, who watched from the door, her expression unreadable. The following Saturday, Ethan sat in a small auditorium, the stage lit with soft lights as Ava, Sophie, and Lily twirled in their ballet recital. He didn't know if they'd call him Dad, or if Rebecca would ever fully trust him. But as Lily waved from the stage, Sophie nodded solemnly, and Ava met his eyes with a flicker of something like acceptance. He felt rooted, for the first time in years, not by wealth or power, but by 3 girls who might, one day, choose him too. Ethan sat in the auditorium, his eyes fixed on Ava, Sophie, and Lily on stage. They didn't call him Dad, but Lily's shy smile, Sophie's nod, and Ava's fleeting glance spoke louder than words. His journey didn't end with a perfect family, but with a beginning, a fragile yet resilient root, like the family tree the girls once drew. Life doesn't always offer clear answers, but sometimes showing up, being patient, and staying honest is enough to mend the gaps. Thanks for joining us on this story of kindness in real life. If it touched your heart, please drop a like to support us. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and share this tale to spread its message of family, hope, and second chances. Your support means the world. Hit that like button, and let's keep the story alive.